Kathleen, yes, this is the weekly good news roundup from the front. And this is the second or third time I've also been doing it as a live. I already sent out the article, and that should be in your inbox. That goes out to everyone, not just notes from the front members. Hi from Ohio. Hi, Suzanne. Yeah, welcome. And hi back from Colorado. Well, here's one of the things. So Laura said, boy, do we ever need some good news. And a lot of the quote unquote bad news that you hear is sensationalized intentionally, and it isn't really quite as bad as they make it. And hey, Eileen, very glad to have you here. Whereas the good news that you hear from me is 100% fact. So I want you to take that into account, that first of all, you are hearing a lot of catastrophizing and sensationalizing, coming both from the far right and the far left. And they actually do it to serve the same purpose even, right? Which is to make you afraid, make you stressed, to get your adrenaline going. Now, the far right wants you afraid because they want you to shut down, and the far left wants you afraid because they want you to get motivated and active. But it's still sensationalized, hyper. Oh, I can't even think of another word for it, but it's still intended to trigger you. And not only that, it's also intended to drive clicks. So I want you to think about that. When you see bad news, make sure you're getting it from a source that is not hyping it, not sensationalizing it, but just giving you the facts. You're all smart enough to know the conclusions that you should be drawing from the facts. You don't need that spoon fed to you. So I want you to keep that in mind. And I also want you to keep in mind that when we do this weekly good news from the front roundup, I'm giving you facts. So hopefully that helps a bit. Yes, hyperbolic, that is a great word. And you know what? I love that you guys join me when I open one of these shows early because I love seeing everyone come in and knowing where they're from and getting to chat a bit and the regulars are greeting each other. I just love all that. This is truly a community. You guys have built this community around this, and I love it. And for those of you who were in the audience yesterday when, uh, excuse me, sort of a very inelegant ending to the show because someone had pulled up in my driveway, and of course, as you all know, I am completely permanently medically isolated, so I don't have people come over, unless they've taken this particular special home COVID test that I have that's PCR quality. So, of course, that's always planned ahead of time. So, for those of you who may have been concerned or just curious, it was actually my son's girlfriend. I didn't know she was in town. They live in Minneapolis. And so she decided to surprise me. So it was all good. It was lovely actually. Hopeful South Carolina, marginal optimist. That's, that's a great username because it's like, you're an optimist, but only a little bit. Central Illinois, welcome, Monique. Here's today's cup. Okay. So, while we're waiting for the official start time and we're in the chit chat, socialize, grab your coffee, grab a seat, greet each other phase, who has some fun plans for the weekend. I will share that I have a very dear friend who has to be as extremely careful as do I medically, and so she always tests before she comes over, again, with this very sensitive COVID test that we both have that we had to get from outside the US, um, and then she's coming over to watch a movie. We've done that for a few weeks now, and tomorrow we're going to watch what was billed as a kids movie, but it's a movie that I really, really love. It's live action, and it's called The Last Mimsy, and it is definitely a movie with a really serious message, and it's very sweet. So if any of you have not seen The Last Mimsy, and if you have done the homework that I gave you to watch Irresistible, I highly recommend it. Oh, Kimber, thank you. That's really kind of you. Thank you so much. Um, yeah. And then just to Eileen, you love which movie, The Last Mimsy or Irresistible? They're both wonderful, but very different. And for those of you who did not see, I actually did give people homework. I believe it was at the end of last week. And that homework was to watch the Steve Carell movie Irresistible. And it's a comedy. You would know that. Obviously, it's Steve Carell, and it's very well done and it's very funny, but it also gives a genuine, very realistic view into local politics and local campaigns. And at the end of the movie, make sure that you watch it through the credits because at the end, there's what some people call the monk's reward, which is where there's more after the credits. And it's Jon Stewart, and he is interviewing an election law expert. And I'm getting goosebumps. I mean, it just watch it, please. And I made the offer it's available everywhere, I believe, streaming, and I made the offer that if you have to pay to watch it, like on Amazon, it's I think $4, I will actually personally refund your money, and you guys know I am not rich, but this is how important it is to me. I will refund what you paid out of my own pocket if you tell me I watched it and I didn't like it. So it's called Irresistible with Steve Carell, and please watch it. Welcome, Qwerty D and Ziggy, Elizabeth. Do I have a way to heart? Isn't that silly? They really should let the people running the show have a way to heart or other emoji comments, but they don't. Okay, awesome, Hamilton, thank you. Hamilton says that, Irresistible is available to rent on YouTube. Absolutely. Then, I when I posted it on Facebook, and again, I think it was the end of last week. It was in fact because I said it was weekend homework. There are people still posting, but they watched it and they were just basically blown away at because and there are people in that audience who are election officials or have run their own campaign and they are saying, yeah, this is exactly what it's like. And it's very, very eye opening. The just, yeah. And of course, and it takes place in Wisconsin, which of course is very apt right now. So, again, that's irresistible. Hey, Jody in Washington State, are you in Western or Eastern Washington or somewhere in between? Because I know, Spokane, you guys, I think they're still battling the fires. I think they're more contained now, but still. Um, Gigi, if you are a big Steve Carell fan, you are going to love this one. God, and I'm laughing because I'm just thinking of some of the scenes. They're just there are scenes with cows that are pretty darn funny. Um, anyway, yeah. Okay, and Jill Matthews is saying that it's on Amazon Prime for free, and do not put a comment about, "Oh, you shouldn't do Amazon," or whatever, just keep that to yourself. So Hamilton, I did not know that. Yeah, and so Hamilton's saying YouTube has a wonderful selection of free top-tier movies every month, and I did not know that. And I also agree, yeah, no commercials. I have to say that I'm kinda spoiled that I just do not I j yeah, commercials there, especially because so many of them are for drugs, and that's just crazy. I think we're probably the only country where it's like that, and years and years and years and years and years and years ago, when I was a young single parent with a two-year-old, I worked as in inside sales for a pharmaceutical wholesaler, so I know, like, more than I want to know about the whole industry, and it's disgusting. Oh, and Chris is saying it's also on Netflix. Awesome. Kimber, did you see oh my gosh. Oh, this is terrible. I'm trying to remember one of my fellow attorney or journalist people here on Substack is actually having, an interview with the guy who was the actual Big Short guy. Um, that sounds funny if you don't know, we're talking about the movie The Big Short guy. Um Because he came out with a prediction about what's happening with, you know, with financials here in the US now. Oh, did you? I haven't seen that. Rooster. Let's see. Hey, Jason, and yes, it probably was, one of the most profitable industries back then and now. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Jenny, Big Short guy's new prediction is scary. Okay, let's see. We are 4 minutes past the official start time, so we're gonna oh, that's who it was, Chris. It was Dean Blundell. Absolutely. Yep. So Dean Blundell, you guys should, definitely trundle on over there and see that interview with Big Short Guy. All right. One more minute because I need another sip of coffee and then we will get started. Do you all have from your inbox the week in law from this morning so you can play along at home? How about if I give you a minute to do that if you want to? Again, I sent it out, oh, probably about 40 minutes ago. So it should be in your inbox. It goes to everybody who subscribes to me, not just the Notes from the Front members, because I think it's important. Chris, where are you that it's evening for you? And here's my mug. Hi, Karen RN. Kimber, I love us together too, and I would love to do a weekly show together. That would be, uh, you know, because it's so fun. It really is so very fun. Okay. All right. Let's get started because we could just, oh, Stuttgart. Oh, sorry, Chris. I have to say that that's where I was when I went to Reforger way back in 1977. We were, with the Army. When I was in the Army, we were at Stuttgart, but that was a very long time ago. Peru. Oh my gosh, Gary. Wow. Welcome. Jason, are you asking if I'm talking about what's in your inbox? If so, I'm talking about the Week in Law, the regular weekly good news roundup. Hi, Sue in the UK. All right. So this is, I think, our third weekly roundup live show that I started doing a couple of weeks ago because people seem to really like it. So here we are. And we are going to talk about what was in and is in the Good News Weekly Roundup from, the law from the front. Uh, so here we go. So the first item in our roundup this week is, boy, do I love this for Blanche, uh, is the Floyd case against Todd Blanche. And it has to do with the anti-weaponization fund. So, the headline here that I did was just when Blanche thought it was safe to go back into the Trump versus IRS water. And this is a case that is not the Trump versus IRS case. It is Floyd versus Blanche, and Andrew Floyd. I always want to say Andrew Floyd Webber, but Andrew Floyd is someone who filed this lawsuit against the Anti-Weaponization Fund, and uh, the court came out and basically said, "Well, let me quickly review because I want to make sure I'm not conflating cases." Okay, because I am conflating cases in my head. Sorry about that. Okay. So, here's what happened. Um, Andrew Floyd filed a case against the Anti-Weaponization Fund, basically saying, uh, "You can't do that, and I have standing," and blah, 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 right? Which is a legal term, blah, 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 blah. And the point is that Blanche cannot serve 2 masters, right? One being Trump and the other being pretty much everything else. And the people, we the people, and the judiciary are part of everything else. So he has to kind of choose. So then when Blanche issued his, I don't even know what to call it, that statement in order to get Massey and Cornyn to agree to confirm him, the plaintiffs in Floyd versus Blanche quickly filed an amended complaint, including that statement. So here he is, Blanche is thinking, okay, I'm putting out this statement. Everything's going to be great now. Kumbaya. I'm the attorney general. And bam, his statement is incorporated into a second amended complaint. And the court says, he's saying that it won't go forward, blah, 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 blah. Um, but the court says, in this case, Floyd comes out with an opinion saying, quote, "The DOJ's concurrent statement about the immunity order purports to narrow the scope of that order but does not rescind it. This unsigned piece of paper," actually, I'm sorry, this is from the second amended complaint. I need more coffee. Hang on. Welcome Coffee is Life. Welcome Julia Gulia and Justice Warrior and Dar and Lisa. Okay, so this is from the second amended complaint. Hang on a minute. I need to turn off my very, very noisy HVAC. Hopefully you guys can't hear that, but if you can, it will stop in a minute. Okay, so from the second amended complaint, um, quote, "After this court preliminarily enjoined the fund, the Anti-Weaponization Fund, acting AG Blanche, because this is before he was confirmed, issued an order on August 2nd purporting to rescind his May 18th funding order by stating the fund is not currently operative. This present tense wordsmithing assuredly does not affirm, under penalty of perjury, that the Anti Weaponization Fund will not proceed in any manner or under any name, either now or in the future. Nor does it purport to prevent the parties to the agreement, quote unquote agreement, in the Trump case, including President Trump, from enforcing that agreement." Again, this is all from the second complaint that now has taken into account Blanche's bogus statement that got him confirmed. It goes on. The DOJ's concurrent statement about the immunity order purports to narrow the scope of that order, but does not rescind it. This unsigned piece of paper, which carries no more weight than a press release, which I have been telling you guys all along, although I said it's worth tissue paper, uh, confirms that the IRS will terminate tax audits and liability at the request of the president, and it will conscript plaintiff NTEU members, I'll tell you what that means in a moment, into violating their oath and the Internal Revenue Code to grant the president with an unconstitutional emolument. Hang on, Lily, it's okay. Gosh, that's just so cliche to be barking at the mailman. Okay. Uh, so NTEU, so Andrew Floyd is a member of one of the unions whose members are, people who work with the IRS, et cetera. So he's basically saying, this thing isn't worth the paper it's written on, but even if it were, it would be unconstitutional. So again, this is all after Blanche issued that statement that got him confirmed. So Blanche was probably thinking, okay, finally, the IRS debacle is behind me. I can focus on other fraud that I intend to commit for the president. But no, he is dragged back into it. So, uh, in addition to Andrew Floyd being one of the class of plaintiffs, also, you may remember that there was a law professor in California, and his last name is Caravello. He is also one of the plaintiffs. So, uh, okay. Any questions about that? That was a little disjointed, I apologize. Okay. The next piece of good news, I think this is probably the big story this week, is that a federal court has once again blocked the post office's mail-in ballot shenanigans. And my I gave the headline neither rain nor snow nor slime nor Trump. For those of you old enough to remember the Postal Service's motto, which was neither rain nor snow nor sleet nor hail will, stop the US mail or something like that. Anyway, so, earlier this week, Judge Talwani, who we have talked about before, she is a real badass, put out an order basically saying, now remember, the USPS proposed rule that they were going to put into effect if it passed musters, I guess, after the public comment. The rule was that, among other things, I mean, it defined what a ballot envelope needed to look like, the dimensions, this and that, but then it also created would have created a portal through which any state who wanted to use mail-in ballots would have to upload their entire mail-in voter rolls. And then the post office would only transit the ballots of states that did that and the people who were on those voter rolls. So this was yet another effort to basically restrict mail in balloting. And this rule was promulgated after Trump had issued an executive order telling the post office to do this. So the lawsuit takes into account the executive order as well as the proposed actual order by the post office. Confused? You won't be. Okay. Oh, where's a loss? So sorry. Who's? Oh, coffee. I'm so sorry. That is so hard. I'm very sorry for your loss. Um, okay. So Judge Talwani basically excoriates Trump in that executive order. And it's important for background to know that the process for a federal agency to promulgate a new rule, at least sometimes, is that they must publish the proposed rule on the Federal Register. That's like a public, not really a forum, it's a register, but through that, the public can provide comment. So, in other words, the proposed rule is open for comment on the Federal Register, and I'm sure many of you have actually utilized that for various rules where you can go and, the public comment period, is open. And then at some point, the public comment period closes and the agency decides whether or not to move forward, or maybe they might revise the rule based on the public comment, or maybe they don't give a good damn, given this administration, about the public comment. But in any event, that's the process. So the USPS published on the Federal Register that they were contemplating this rule, the rule being, among other things, that the states who want to use mail-in balloting would upload their voter rolls through this USPS portal. And that public comment closed at the end of last month, at the end of July. The other thing you need to know is that Trump's executive order ordering the post office to do this also said that the rule had to be put into effect by the end of July. So those are two things to keep in mind as I tell you about Judge Talwani's order. Okay. I'm trying to decide where to start quoting. I think I'll just start at the top. Okay, so Judge Talwani says, as discussed in its prior decisions and expanded upon below, like you already know, wow, she's in it, the court finds it prudent to review. Oh, I'm sorry. So there's another piece that you need to know. Originally, she had already enjoined this action. And then the Trump administration said, well, you don't actually have jurisdiction because the case is not ripe. Now, we have discussed ripeness here before. Ripeness is a legal doctrine that means that a court cannot entertain a case if the alleged damages are just speculative, or if the alleged action is just speculative. In other words, it hasn't happened yet, and it might not even happen. The court has to deal only with facts that are facts on the ground. And so the administration said, appealed on the basis of ripeness. The administration said, you can't enjoin this rule because it doesn't even exist yet. And it may not ever exist. So, therefore, you don't have any jurisdiction to order us to not put into effect this rule because we don't even know if it's going to be a rule. So they appealed it, and the appeals court said, yeah, you're right. It's not, the case isn't ripe yet. And so they, stayed the injunction. So now, I think you have all the pieces you need for this. As discussed in its prior decisions and expanded upon below, the court finds it prudent to review the executive order, and the emphasis here on now, to review the executive order now, was actually Judge Talwani's emphasis. She underlined now because, of course, they were challenging it on ripeness. So she is saying now it's ripe enough. So I hope you guys all get that. So as discussed in its prior decisions and expanded upon below, the court finds it prudent to review that executive order now, where less than 90 days penned before the midterms and the millions of citizens who rely on mail voting require clarity as to how or whether they should vote or will vote in November. Now, it's important to understand that at this point, that deadline has passed. So it's the end of July happened, so the deadline for public comment has passed. The deadline that Trump put in his order for the post office to spin up this attack on mail-in voting has also passed. But the administration and the USPS have not moved forward. And I am 100% confident that is because they were trying to keep it unripe until the very last minute. And by what she is saying here and emphasizing now, that's what Judge Talwani is seeing as well. That, you know what? You can play these games, but I am now going to make an order because, you are trying to get around my jurisdiction owing to ripeness. Um, And then she goes on to explain that the executive order itself says that, and she quotes, any final USPS rule with respect to mail in balloting shall be issued no later than 120 days from the date of that executive order, and that 120 days told on July 29th. And she says, and yet no final rule has been announced. And then the way I put it in my write-up of it was that then she says the 3 little words that the League of Women Voters, who are the plaintiffs, long to hear. Have an injunction. Of course, she didn't really say that, but she did issue an injunction. So, here is Judge Talwani's beautiful order. All of the defendants, and there were a lot of them, from Trump down to the Postmaster General and everybody in between, all of the defendants are and I'm quoting now, are preliminarily enjoined from implementing, giving effect to, or enforcing the executive order with respect to the November 3rd, 2026, or any earlier federal election, including refusing to transmit mail in or absentee ballots, or otherwise initiating or completing rulemaking to promulgate the specific regulations outlined in the executive order. In other words, she was being very careful to close off every possible loophole. Well, now guess what? It's too late for you to actually initiate or complete that rulemaking because you blew it. And the other thing that she said was she then threw them a bone because she said that it's okay if the post office wants to give general guidance to the states, but no rulemaking. So, uh, there's that one. Hey, Shannon, coffee is life. Yes, that is a very uh, excellent ruling. And yeah, when we opened the show, we did discuss that Substack seems to be extra laggy today, so I apologize for that, although it's beyond my control. I just hate it when um, I hate it when I freeze, literally. But Carter, I'm glad to know that you can still at least hear me. You don't really need to see me. Okay. Now, the next item in our weekly good news roundup is a little bit different because it's not actually from a court case. It's about something I discovered, and I don't usually include, me in the good news roundup, but I think this one merits inclusion. And a lot of you already know about this because you attended the live broadcast that I did about it. But for those of you who don't, I found proof of the DOJ breaking the law, specifically the Epstein File Transparency Act, by having redacted 30 names from a document, none of whom fit the redaction exceptions from the Epstein File Transparency Act law. They were not victims. They were not the family of victims. They were, for the most part, not perpetrators. There may have been some perps in there, but none that I have actually seen evidence of. For the most part, they were politicians and Hollywood royalty and real royalty, but not a one of them a victim or a victim's family, which is not only the only actual uh, allowed redactions in the law, but they very specifically in the law had said, you cannot redact just because someone is a politician or it might embarrass them. So, and I have the actual unredacted document. And that document was not in any of the DOJ drops. I got it from an external, investigation that I did. And so I think this is a very, very big deal. And it's not who the names are. And for those of you, for notes from the front members who got that document, please do not mention any names in the show because this is public and you know that, we just, there are reasons that documents like that should not be disclosed publicly because there is a big difference between public disclosure and not public disclosure or public publication. And that's especially true for me because as an attorney, I am held to a higher standard. And so I just cannot afford to have that come at me. But also in this case, you as citizens, just don't share it publicly because there's just, again, a huge difference between public republication and sharing something in private. But anyway, I found this document. I saw that the only version of it on the DOJ site was redacted with all these names, and the names don't even make sense. And so the point is not who are those names. The point is they shouldn't have been redacted, and that violated the law. And yes, I have reached out to the right people to get that document to them and so I thought that merited being in the weekly Good News Roundup because I think when we have them just like, what's the term, dead to rights or something, like where it's very clear that, it's clear evidence of them breaking the law, I think that's kind of a big deal. Dar, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, Jen, here is my mug. Hi, Chris Palomino. Thank you, Jason. Dead to rights, that is the term, thank you. Okay, let's see. What's our next, oh, and this is actually the last entry. It was a pretty short it was actually a really light week in the courts in terms of any decisions that are coming out that, of any specific import. But the ones that were, first of all, the post office thing, I mean, that's huge. And then yesterday, the Blanche hearing, which again was not actually Blanche. It was his attorney, whose name is Block. And I have to apologize for originally calling him Blanche. I will say for those of you who were on the hearing call, you will also know that the acoustics, especially in the beginning, were really bad. And so, I didn't hear Block versus Blanche when he introduced himself. In fact, for notes from the front members who have the transcript now, if you have read it, you will have seen, and if you haven't read it, you will see. And boy, really, you need to read it. It is a beautiful transcript. And again, just to remind you, that's what your $5 a month goes towards, is so that I can purchase those transcripts and, keep doing what I'm doing for you guys. So, and of course, the coffee that sustains me. So thank you so much, Notes from the Front members for that $5 a month, and not only, for me, but that helps the people who really can't come up with $5 a month, they're on a very tight budget, that helps them to still be able to at least, to receive my reporting. So, thank you, everybody. But in any event, I hope that you have the transcript and you will have seen, a couple of things. One, that Judge Sullivan basically called out the acoustics himself. He was just like, "Hey, the acoustics in this courtroom suck." I don't think he said suck, but, um, but also, and I love this, and I actually told the court reporter this, when I ordered the transcript. Judge Sullivan himself, for any of you who have ever doubted that I have to pay good money for these transcripts, Judge Sullivan himself says at the end of the hearing, I want you parties to order the transcripts from the court reporter. Yes, I get them for free, but she has to make money too. And so I want you to order them from her and pay her. And I loved that. It's kind of like tip your waiter well, at a restaurant. It's like the court reporters are the unsung heroes that, help keep along with paralegals you know, uh, that keep this going. They're the grease on the wheels of justice. Oh, yeah. That sounds a little gory, but slowly turn the wheels of justice, and they wouldn't turn at all if they weren't greased by the paralegals and the court reporters. So, okay, so we're gonna talk about that hearing. So first of all, again, it wasn't Blanche, it was Block, and I'm not gonna really go through it much because a lot of you guys already have the transcript, but I really want to talk about something that I don't even know what the best phrase is, butters my biscuit, or like just really, some of you may have seen my rant today because I was angry. There are so many people out there, these armchair judges who have no concept of the law, let alone how the judicial system works, who are bitching. Sorry, but that Judge Sullivan did not hold Blanche and by proxy Block in contempt yesterday. They're like, "Oh, why didn't he just order to hold them in contempt? They're never gonna get." If you have read the transcript, then you already know what a judge has to go through before they can hold someone in contempt. And Judge Sullivan, in the hearing yesterday, did a masterful job of lining it up, but it wasn't time to knock it down. A judge, in order to hold someone in contempt, has to bend over backwards to make sure that the person, let's just call them Joe. I guess we could call him Todd. Has to make sure that Todd completely understood all the orders that Todd is supposedly, and actually, with which they're not complying, completely understands a deadline, which in fact, it seems there were not deadlines that were, firm because, Mr. Block kept asking for a deadline, which meant he was asking for something conclusive so they could appeal it. The judge has to make sure that Todd has every opportunity to comply with the orders. The judge has to make sure that, in fact, it is possible for Todd to comply with the orders. The judge has to resolve any tension between his orders and orders of other courts, which was actually brought up in the hearing yesterday. The judge has to basically make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, all the loopholes have been sewn up, that the entire thing is airtight or watertight or whatever you want to call it. The entire potential for a contempt charge has to be so precise, so absolutely airtight before he can issue a contempt charge. And in large part, this is because it will be immediately appealed. And if he doesn't do all of that, then likely it will be reversed on appeal, and who wants that? So, this as you'll read in the transcript, in this hearing, Judge Sullivan did exactly all of that. And at the end of the hearing, and I say the end, but in the transcript, it's like 25% of the transcript. The transcript is like 48 pages, and this thing I'm about to describe was 13 of them at the end. Judge Sullivan tells a story from the bench. And this is after first of all, just to give you the background, um, Block said, "Oh, Judge Sullivan is saying, 'Well, where are the documents? And, where's this? And where's your, complying with my order?'" And Block says, basically, "Here, Your Honor, may I approach the bench? Here's this binder, and I think this binder what's in this binder will answer a lot of your questions." And so Judge Sullivan says, "Okay, I'm gonna take a 15-minute recess." That 15-minute recess turned into an hour recess, and I have to tell you that I got on the call an hour early to make sure that I was going to be able to get in. I sat there with dead air for an hour, then I listened to the first part of the hearing, and then Judge Sullivan says, "15-minute recess," and I proceed to wait for another hour of dead air before he actually comes back. But what he was doing was, first of all, skimming, his words, that binder, what was in that binder. And also, I am confident he was having his clerk or himself look up some of the law and look up this case that he is about to talk about when he says he's going to tell them a story. And so he comes back. Let me see if I had the actual quote. Um, well, okay. So he comes back and he says, quote, "The plaintiff," that's Katie Fang, "the plaintiff has raised the issue of contempt." In other words, in her pleadings and also during the hearing, Fang has basically said, at this point, they have failed to follow your orders, and we believe that sanctions and contempt would be appropriate. So she has raised the issue of contempt by saying that. So he says the plaintiff has raised the issue of contempt. Actually, I'm going to stop for a minute. Show of hands, how many of you I wanna see a show of 2 different things. How will I do this? Okay. Show of hands, how many of you have actually were on the call for any period of time? And then with a heart emoji, how many of you actually have the transcript right now that I sent out? Okay, yeah, a lot of people couldn't get on, which is one of the reasons I got the transcript for you guys. Okay, look at all the that means you guys are also just, notes from the front members and supporting me, and thank you, thank you, thank you. Free to love, that's awesome. She typed out heart instead of the emoji. Okay, Jason Gale, I don't even know, you've got a jack-o'-lantern and a skull mask. I I don't even know what that means, but it was funny. Okay, alright. So, for those of you who were able to be on the call or or have the transcript in front of you now, and I want to say for those of you who are not Notes from the Front members, and that's that $5 a month membership that helps support me do things like this, if you want to join now just so that you can have access to the previous documents, including the transcript, and then cancel, I'm totally fine with that. I really am. But this is one of the ways, as I mentioned, there are sometimes that, where I share things that could get me in trouble to share them publicly. And so that is a way to do that, to be able to share things a bit more safely because it's private, because I know it's limited to Notes from the Front members. So again, totally fine to join and then cancel. That's fine. Um, anyway, so I am confident that those of you who are able to get on the call or who have the transcript loved the first line out of the box in this story that Judge Sullivan starts to tell. both parties, but it's obviously intended for Blanche through Block. Quote, "The plaintiff has raised the issue of contempt." Relax. No one is in contempt, all right? I mean, that's literally what he said in just that way, like, immediately. The plaintiff has raised this issue, but relax. No one is in contempt, all right? Because he could probably see Block starting to get, like, really nervous. All right. The plaintiff has raised the issue of contempt in response to the court's preliminary injunction order. And to remind people, the court issued this preliminary injunction telling the DOJ, you need to produce these 6 or 8, whatever it was, documents unredacted to the court. And of course, they haven't done that yet. And part of why is because Block was saying during the hearing, well, we have this other court order from another court that requires us to keep those names confidential and basically not unredact. Um, so he goes on to say, I just needed to let me say this. I think now I should deepen my voice. I'll put on my radio voice. I think now is a good opportunity to discuss that topic in very general terms with the parties. I'm not focusing on the plaintiff or the defendant, just the parties, to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm going to talk about a case that this court presided over in 2000, right? This is him saying, let me tell you a story. It was a very unusual case, not because the subject matter was complicated. And then he goes on to tell how this senator was a defendant and the prosecution, in other words, the government, had these documents that they failed to produce, even though they had been ordered to produce them. And as it turns out, in this case that he's talking about, those documents were exculpatory, meaning they went towards the innocence of the defendant. And in fact, judgment had already been rendered, or at least, this defendant had already been found to be either guilty or likely guilty. There was a motion and a decision. And then an FBI whistleblower basically got the information to the court that, hey, the government has these documents and they are withholding them. They're not producing them and they're exculpatory. So then the judge said, okay, uh, government, I am ordering you to produce these documents to the defendant. And then, some weeks later, they had a status hearing, and the judge said, and this is Judge Sullivan, and Judge Sullivan said, hey, defendant, did the government produce these documents to you? Like, well, no, Your Honor. So they rescheduled another status conference and, to give the government time, because this is Judge Sullivan, in that case, doing everything he had to. He's bending over backwards. He's making sure the government understands. He's making sure the government can do it. He's doing all the things we just talked about, leading up to the issuing of a contempt charge. So there was another status hearing, and Judge Sullivan said to the defendant, hey, defendant, did the government get you those documents yet? No, Your Honor. And so then he issues a contempt charge against the government. And the government appeals, which is what the government does. And one of the things I love is that Judge Sullivan basically said, yeah, we judges know you're going to appeal it. We don't care. The trial still goes on. Go ahead, appeal it. Right. But then he makes the point that this guy appealed, the government appealed, and that the appellate court upheld the contempt charge. Why? Because he was so very careful to make sure he had all his ducks in a row before he issued that contempt charge to make it unassailable. And then, God, I just love this. He goes on to explain, and again, he says so many times now, I'm not contemplating contempt here. I really don't want to issue a contempt charge. I'm just telling you this story. By the way, did you know that I am one of the only judges in this district to have issued a contempt against the government, and it was upheld? So, just by the way, because I'm telling you a little story. And then he goes on to say, in the telling of this story, it's a really serious matter for the court to hold attorneys in contempt. This is why we don't wanna do it, because it's something that they probably have to report for the rest of their career if they are seeking a new job, if they're being considered for a judgeship locally or federally, or maybe in a confirmation hearing where some inquiring senator will say, "Talk to us about that contempt matter some years ago before Judge Sullivan." And I just love Judge Sullivan because that was so awesome. He was basically saying all of the quiet part out loud, but quietly. Like, basically, "Listen, Block Qua Blanche or Blanche Qua Block, whichever it is, listen, I don't wanna do this. Don't make me do this." Like, at the end of it, I'm like, this seems like a scene from The Godfather. Like, "I really don't want to do this, but, but we take it very seriously and we protect our own," because in this case, our own is the public and the victims, and Judge Sullivan says as much. So, um, if you haven't read the transcript yet and you have it, by all means do. It will put such a broad smile on your face, and you will also then understand why Judge Sullivan did not issue a contempt charge yesterday. He did everything yesterday that he needed to do to be sure to issue a contempt charge in case Block didn't get the message. Okay. And that is the end of our weekly good news from the front lineup. Let's see, wondered if there's a contempt charge and DOJ is fine. Do the taxpayers ultimately end up paying? That's a really good question. Rose Lady is asking if there were a fine, who would pay that fine, and would it be the taxpayers? And I honestly don't know because I don't really know if there would be a fine. I think what I've seen, at least, when there is an actual contempt charge, it's basically, I mean, in some cases, it's in jail until, you've heard, that people being held in contempt go to jail and that they have the keys to the jail, right? And the keys are comply. So it's, in my experience, it's basically, um, not monetary. But if it were, and I don't even know if it could be, I honestly don't know, but if it were, I'm really not sure where it would come from. Okay. Hey, Hamilton, thank you. You have a wonderful weekend as well. No, coffee is life. No, it's not. It usually is not a fine, especially if you're talking about criminal contempt. Mm. I'm sure that Fang did ask for fines. That's different from contempt. That's sanctions. Lisa, are you asking what is a special master or are you suggesting a special master? And by the way, guys, I really hope you're not disappointed when you ask a question and I tell you I don't know, because that's the real answer. And it would be so disingenuous of me to, make something up based on my experience. I mean, I may think I know, but if I don't actually know, I'm not going to shine you on. I'm going to tell you, I don't know. Okay, so you're asking if he could order a special master. I mean, he could, I suppose, but I don't see any reason to do that. So for people who don't know, a special master is basically someone who oversees the minutia of the case, to offload it onto, someone so the judge isn't doing it all. So can't they elect a special prosecutor? Well, I mean, Kimber, that would require the Democrats to, control. at least one of the houses, probably both of the houses, which I am very hopeful will happen in November. I'm confident we will flip the House, and I think there is a chance we could flip the Senate. And that is one of the reasons that Trump is so scared right now. Oh, I see. Okay, you think Fang requested a special master. Um, that's entirely possible. Let's see. Dave. I don't know who Dave is that you're talking about in a crowded cell. An overnight or 2 for Blanche in jail cell would be a good thing. Really? Only an overnight or 2? Oh, now I see Dave. You're responding to Dave. I think more than an overnight or 2. There are moments, just moments, where I almost can feel a little sorry for Blanche, but only almost, because he got himself into it. What I can see is that he is truly between a rock and a hard place, but, you know, it's his own doing. So I don't really ever feel sorry for him, but there are moments where I can almost come close because I can imagine being between those 2 forces. Okay. Stop. Okay, Laura, I'll stop. Um, Eric, I also hope we can flip the Senate. Dave from California, where in California are you? I moved here from California, although I'm originally from the East Coast. Guys, I just wanna give you a little more hope. Everybody dies. People who are really old are more likely to die. I would never want to wish harm coming to anyone, but let's face it, 80 in terrible health, you know, it's gonna happen at some point. Okay, West Side, Southern California. Okay, I moved here from the Bay Area. And where's my Washington person? I asked them if they were on Eastern or Western Washington because of those fires in Spokane, but I never saw the response because everything's flying by. Yeah, Linnea, I really think so too. For a private one is my nothing. Hi, Linnea in the Bay Area. Where are you? I mean, I actually moved from New York to the Bay Area for grad school. So I was in Palo Alto or, near Palo Alto. And then I spent way too many years in Sunnyvale. Ah, right in the city proper. We have Washington. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Jason, I am still waiting for you to send me a buffalo salad from the Saturn Cafe. Alright, guys, so we're gonna go about another 5 minutes just to give you time to say your goodbyes to each other or whatever you want, um, and then I am going to close this. Eric, are you asking me about Albany? I did spend time in Albany. That is where I first got involved in advocacy. I was in Buffalo at the time, but that was when I started advocating for children, and their fathers, and by going to Albany to testify against a bill. So that's the time that I spent in Albany. Carter, the title of the article that I sent out this morning is, hang on and I'll give you the exact, well, it's weekly good news from the front. Let's see, weekly good news roundup. How can I not know that by now? Um, Give me just a moment, please. It is, drum roll please, The Week in Law, the weekly good news roundup from the front line of the legal battle to save the soul of our democracy. And that is the same title it has every week. I just changed the date. All right, guys. Yes, Laura, get back to work. Thank you for joining us. Okay. I believe because it was so popular, I will be hosting the Ask Me Anything live tomorrow. You guys who were there last week know that I truly do mean anything. No question is off limits. And legal or personal. So I believe I'll be doing that. Unfortunately, I can't give you far advance notice because I never know exactly when I'm going to schedule a live show. It just depends on so much. There's so many moving parts for me here. But I believe I will be doing it again, so watch for that. And Jason, yes, that's great. I will see you Sunday as well. And for the thing, just so you guys know, we're part of a group where that has a regular weekly Zoom. Is the oath to the Constitution constitutional? That's a very interesting question, Dave from California. I have never thought of that, so I have never looked into it. Is there a reason that you would think it wasn't? I mean, as an officer of the court, I have to take it's not an oath to the Constitution, mind you. It's an oath to uphold the Constitution. It's an oath to uphold the law. I can see no reason why that wouldn't be legal. And as an officer of the court, I had to take an oath, which I take very seriously, to uphold the laws, which include the Constitution. Well, to protect and defend, you know, defending the Constitution means upholding the law or defending the law. So I'm really not certain where it would be unconstitutional. Perhaps you're inferring the word defend means something military rather than upholding the laws in court? I mean, it doesn't, but maybe that's where the question comes from? Oh, well, I mean, that's a whole different question. And that is a very and I'm not saying you're simplistic, but, you know, asking if something can be enforced against Trump, it's not a simple black or white question any more than asking about any question of law. There are always so many factors, which is always why lawyers will tell you it depends. So, um, yeah. All right, guys, I am going to go. Thank you so much for joining me here, and more importantly, for joining everybody else in this amazing community. And and Jody, just quickly, so you know, so as I mentioned at the start, my fun weekend thing is we're going to watch the last Mimsy tomorrow, which takes place on one of the islands, not Bainbridge, but one of the other islands. Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you again. Love you.